Welcome to the Old Mac Gang podcast, or OMG, a vodcast with a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services to age-seasoned users. I'm Marty Jencius, an Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I'm a 67-year-old age-seasoned user who has collected a great group of friends to talk about Apple and issues that maybe seasoned citizens have to deal with. So let's just find out who's in our panel today. If you'll introduce yourself. Yeah.
My name is Peter Petto. I am a 72-year-old age-seasoned retired foundryman, and after that, retired high school math teacher who dove into the Apple ecosystem in 2006 and continue to love using many of Apple's devices every day.
I'm a 87-year-old Apple user, retired Department of Defense auditor, and I've been involved with Apple products for the last 20 years. Marty.
My name is Bob Wood, and I am a 70-something year old Mac user who has been part of user groups for something like 30 years now.
Well, we've got a good panel, and we had some discussion with our previous shows that we thought we'd take this show as sort of the first show in maybe a series. And the concept is, how do you solve your tech problems? And so we're hoping listeners and viewers of the show will get some ideas when they have a tech problem, where they can go, what resources they can have. And today we're just going to ask the question, how do each of us solve a problem when it comes up? And then subsequent shows will be shows where you'll be able to, we're going to take each one of those and spend a little bit more dedicated time to those ways in which we troubleshoot. So let's start. And I'm just going to ask the question, and we'll do, after we get through this round of questions, we'll do a little bit more conversation on it. But what steps do you take when you're faced with a tech problem?
Okay, maybe I'll start. I'll start with my holy trinity, which is the first three things I do before I do any kind of research. And in half the cases, I'm done. I don't need to do research. And the Holy Trinity, probably for anybody who's used devices for a long time, will sound very familiar. Number one, if it's a device, turn it off, count to 17, and turn it back on. Okay? A lot of times you're done. Number two, if you already know that settings are involved, essentially you're going to do the same thing with the settings. Even if they look correct, you toggle them. You change them, and then you change them back. And if turning it off and on didn't work, a lot of times that work. And the last one, which is the subject of many computer jokes, is to ask myself, maybe I should be the first, is it plugged in? Okay, so this hasn't been as big a deal anymore, but I have come across it recently. So I'm going to say not just your computer or your phone or whatever it is. You might be thinking about your router, your dock, or on your computer, the MagSafe cord. Both my wife and I fold up our laptops and use them in clamshell mode. And if that MagSafe connector becomes loose, it seems like your keyboard doesn't work or your monitor doesn't work or something else doesn't work, but you're not plugged in. And it may also be power or pairing of your Bluetooth devices. So if you have a keyboard or a trackpad that's Bluetooth, you're going to check to see, does it have juice, and check to see that it's paired, which is usually plugging it into your computer. It pairs, and then you're done. So I'll let other people respond.
No, Peter, I'm sure you have more ideas, but it's really nice when I hear things that I know I've heard you do in our Mac users group. It's like, well, first power it off and power it back on. And so I relish in the fact that you're sharing some of those same ideas with that. I hope we can round back to you for other ideas. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, then let's go to Bob.
Well, Peter, you stole some of mine already. I spent a career in repairing electronic, mechanical, and even hydraulic office equipment systems, from desktop items to large equipment. And turning it off, turning it back on solves an awful lot of them. Sometimes I went into an office and, oh, well, this doesn't work. Turn it off, turn it back on, make sure it's plugged in, and it's worked. What do you do? It was the laying on of hands. And make the sign of the cross, and we'll see you later. But yeah, all of those things are certainly true. Plus, you sometimes need to get outside help. You may need to search the Apple Support database. You may need to go to YouTube. YouTube is a great resource no matter what you're doing, whether it is changing a tire on your car or doing surgery inside a computer, because they will oftentimes have several people with produced videos for that. So YouTube is a very good resource as well. And then there's Phone a Friend. In our user group, we have some mail lists, and if you get a real head scratcher, you can ask a questionnaire, and you almost always will get an answer. And even most of the time, it's right. But you're going to get some support from a friend inside a user group as well. So those are the items that I would say are kind of on the top of my list.
All right. Gary, what
Yeah.
kind of ideas do you have?
I have ideas too. I wonder though the why of the turn it off, turn it back on. I'd like to believe there's some kind of a reset that it'll do, but I've done that also. But I'll move, as I shared last week. Peter's turned me on, and I don't work yet for Perplexity, but Marty's earlier turned me on to just do a Google search and quit asking questions. So both on tech and other stuff, I use Perplexity now. That's kind of my number one, Peter. And then a week ago, Zoom gave me a 1-year subscription to Perplexity Pro. And then recently, Marty found on a app on this cheap gpt.store, they have 80% off on the 1-year $200 subscription. I checked it today and it was 82%. The other item I use, Marty, is I use the Genius bar when I'm really struggling with an Apple that I can't solve. And it's easy. The phone number, you can go online, of course, apple.com, and contact them. But what I've done the last 2 times, instead of the Genius bar, I've made the phone call to the 800 number. And within 5 minutes or less, I've had a competent technical person who's helped me through issues, even simple ones like my sister's computer that I couldn't open because I didn't know her password after she passed away. So those are my 2, Perplexity and Apple. Marty?
Cool. I'll tell you, I use a lot of Google. And, I have Chrome set up, and it has, I guess, a place where you can turn it on and you can get AI done. It's called the Search Labs. And so whenever I Google something, the first thing that comes up at the top of the list are results. So while you were doing the show, while you're talking, I Googled steps you should take for troubleshooting your Mac. And what came up at the top for me was under the Search Labs option was restart your Mac. Thank you, Peter. Boot into safe mode, which is another thing that people will do. Reset your NVRAM. Reset your SMC. These are all kind of typical troubleshooting steps. And I know when I've been to the Genius Bar, the few times I've been there, they go through the same procedure. And I'm like, I tried this at home. Yeah, but we got to do it here just to make sure. And it's not meant as any insult to me. I understand what their process is. Reinstall Mac OS and then install from a recovery. So those were kind of the top tips. They also said reinstalling the app, try a secondary account, running Apple Diagnostics. I'll tell you though, Google is where I start now, and I've found that if I put a really clear description of what's going on, I get better Google results. So if I just type in Mac won't start, you know, I have to kind of if I give more context for it, I get better answers. Um, I will go to the Apple support page, and I know Chris is not with us tonight because he's up in the Highlands somewhere without Wi-Fi, and he suggested the Apple support site. When I go to the Apple support site, often the articles are, or I can type in what I'm looking for, and sure, something will come up, and then there's no answer given. It's sort of like everybody's got the problem, nobody's responded to it. And I've done the website and online. The last time I was on with an online chat, I was having some problem and it was late at night. And I went on to the online chat and I just got the poorest help on it. The person did not, and it was a simple problem. But I sure there was something that I wasn't doing right. And when I do that, sometimes it's sort of like, oh yeah, I should have thought of that. And then it fixes it. But this time, in this case, I walked away with no result satisfaction. I wound up having to take it in for a Genius Bar appointment. They fixed it right away. I know what it was. It was a reboot that I was trying to do on a machine that got hung up in the middle and then never, I pulled the power on it, which I shouldn't have done. But then it just never, I corrupted it. So I had to take it into the Genius Bar anyway. YouTube is good. I know Bob has mentioned that. And again, the better description you put in for your problem, the better results you'll get back. I'll use Reddit occasionally. Reddit is a resource that's got some good stuff in it that you can search or you can look for, but it's not a large searchable database. You kind of have to go to the subreddits and see if and you can post a question. People will give you the results to it, which is kind of nice. It's a good resource, but it's already there. I got to go find it, sort of resource. But Reddit's another option. So that's sort of the game that I do, and occasionally, on a few occasions, Genius Bar. But I'm 40 minutes away from in either direction from a Genius Bar. Gary, I know you're just down the street from one, and so sometimes that's not a convenient option for a lot of folks. So just ideas or things, Gary, maybe Peter, you've got more you'd like to share or that we made the first round?
Well, Ray, you've covered a lot of the things because my next ones all had to do with look it up. But I do think certain kinds of devices, and I know people think manuals are old school, but I've found with printers, scanners, and webcams, just plugging in the model number on the company website and pulling up the quick start guide and the manual and giving it a glance before doing anything else has been very helpful. And with Googling it, I agree all about context, although I've been using Perplexity and ChatGPT more than Google recently. Maybe that's just because I'm experimenting. But Google is super if you search with the domain name. So you have your search terms and then you say site : and give the domain that you want to search. And typically I'll use the company's website. And then I'll get a better search than even the search box that the company provides on their support webpage. I'll find things that weren't there, so which is surprising to me. And a lot of times companies have online support forums. You usually have to sign in and create a password, but that's not a problem now that our computers remember the passwords. Uh, but that's nice because there's usually some avid users there who, if you post a question within 24 hours, they'll give you a very detailed answer. So those are a couple things that I had that I didn't hear mentioned.
Bob, spark any ideas from you?
Well, I certainly agree that RTFM, read the friendly manual, is very important.
Yeah.
Also, in my years of repairing other kinds of equipment, going in and talking to the operators, you got to get more than "it's broke."
Yeah.
You need to interrogate them and well, when did this happen and what were you doing and things like that. And oftentimes a reboot will do it. But all of those things aside, my wife just bought a new iPhone, an iPhone 16, and we were moving everything over from her iPhone 14 to the 16 and moving an eSIM from one to the other. And it helps to make a list of things that you need to do before you actually sit down and do them. We got it started and we got the transfer done. And then, okay, it's dinner time. We're going to sit down. And while we were sitting down, I was writing out a list of this is what we need to do to the old phone. This is what we need to do to the new phone. So getting some context of what you need to do and how to do it to get the credit cards over, to get the credit cards to the watch, to pair the watch with the phone. And then when everything's done, what do you got to do with the old phone before you send it back to Apple? So making a list is oftentimes very important.
Yeah. I just picked up a new MacBook Pro and also a MacBook or a Mac Mini, and was going from old devices to these new devices. And I don't like to do migration. I like to do a clean install, and it requires a little bit more work and more energy. But what I found myself doing this time, because everything's connected through iCloud, I did screenshots of my application window. And then I had a list of all the applications that were on my old MacBook that I want to put or not put on my new MacBook. So then I could go down that list and from the graphic on the new MacBook and start to add applications that I wanted to. I do a lot of my application purchasing through the Apple Store, so it makes it easy for me on a new machine to be able to find it and reload it and do it that way. So getting your idea of getting a list of what you have to do to troubleshoot what's coming up, I think is real valuable there, Bob. Yeah.
Well, I almost think that screenshot kung fu could be a whole program, because when Bob was saying making a list, every time I get a new phone or something, the thing that aggravates me the most, and it didn't aggravate me this time because I used screenshots to make a list of what I had on my phone in Kindle and in Audible, which don't transfer over nicely. I mean, they're there and you just have to name them and they download. But remembering what you had, because usually I have things there that I want to be reading, somehow next, within the
Yeah.
next. And taking the screenshots made that super easy.
That's an important point. Screenshots. I advocate that. We have other people in our group who are helping a lot of other people for pay, and Melissa very much is in favor of screenshots. Here in this house, we recently changed from one satellite TV service to a different satellite TV service. And we had the previous one for 15 years. We had all of our season passes on the old one. How are we going to remember these? And basically what I did is I put them up on the screen of the TV and took a picture of each one. Had about, I think they're still on my phone. But that's one of the uses I have for the phone is what I call note taking.
Yeah. I once I got the new applications on my new devices, I deleted the screenshots because I was done with them at that point, and I just didn't want to clutter them. I didn't want to save them in a folder for no reason. I just cleaned them up. Trouble when you're troubleshooting something, um, is there a way of thinking that you have that helps you make decisions about what to do next? And maybe I'll start with, I asked the question, maybe I'll answer the question. For me, I try to think about what am I asking the computer or the device to do? And from what I'm asking it to do, if it's not working, where is it? Where in the system is that a problem? So if the app won't open, or it opens and closes really quickly, first thing I'm going to think of is maybe go to the app, delete it, reload it. And that sometimes solves the problem because whatever the app is hooked up to within the operating system gets reconnected when I reload the app. So my thinking is I try to think about what I'm asking it to do and where the mistakes could happen in the process of doing it, and what then might be the thing to go to first to fix.
I would agree with that. Mostly it's your life experience. You know, start at the basics. Is there power at the wall? Is the plug plugged into the wall? Is it plugged into the back of the machine? You know, do you get any lights on the machine? And you just follow it out from the wall, whether it's power or Ethernet or Wi-Fi or whatever, and you know, start with the most basic building blocks and lead up from there.
Yeah, there's something that's hard to say, but what I'm going to say is the context of your problem, you know, I can't get this menu to pop up. Is the menu coming from my software? Is it coming from a website? Is it, I mean, to think, when I push the key that I'm expecting something to happen, where do I think that key is going? And sometimes you've got you're heading down the wrong road. And when you think a little bit about, maybe it's not that, maybe this program is talking to something else, and that's the thing I need to, to make sure is really happening. You think something's happening just, in some code that's on your screen in your browser, and it's really popping a query out to the internet, and because you've got some intermittent internet or something like that, that's the issue. So that stuff's not obvious, and it's certainly not obvious to people you're trying to help because they just know I did it yesterday and now I did it today and I did the same exact thing and now it doesn't work.
Yeah,
And
Gary, do you have any thoughts on that? On what the
No,
thinking process is for you?
I, I'm not sure. I think I just try to solve the problem, and I'm not into that many different programs. I'm really just using the basics, and they work, except when I had the problem, Peter, with my Aero router. I couldn't figure it out. So I ended up calling them, and I'm not sure. we got it back working. So
Yeah, routers for me, I think are like medieval magic. I don't really quite understand them as much as they can be explained. They puzzle me because I know when you had router issues, I was like, man, Gary, this is not my thing.
mm.
Yeah.
I too, as Bob was saying, this isn't quite the system, but a lot before I could always find somebody who could help me, or I would know they couldn't help me or didn't want to help me. But I've been very fortunate of learning, though, of asking questions, getting answers, and knowing where to go. It's on a lot of things. It's been helpful.
I just want to say one thing, because as I listen to this show and it's all about problems, 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 I will say that, over the last 20 years, the amount of support and help I've needed is just going down, down, down. I mean, I think devices are getting better,
Mhm.
diagnostics are getting better. People I might help are getting more savvy. I mean, I can remember, spending a lot of time saying, how do I make this into a PDF and attach it to an email? I mean, I must have spent, 5 hours of my life walking through how to do that with just about every member of my extended family. Uh, but now you say that to most people and they just do it, and that's great.
Peter, you have a really good gift of because I've seen you do this with our Mac user group of being able and with Gary and with me of being able to kind of simply dice up the problem in a way that makes it approachable for anybody that's trying to solve it. I picked up a lot over the years. Devices have gotten better. It's often difficult for me to really have a solution for somebody who's asking me about an operating system that's 5 or 6 years old. It's like, I don't know how to solve that problem. Buy a new piece of equipment. That's how I've solved it. But that's where I really struggle. And I've seen you do that really well in terms of stepping people through the kinds of things that we're talking about. But I
Yeah.
agree with you, devices have gotten better. We're able to use them in a much more easier way. And so I think we're better all around, but occasionally we have things that just don't work right for us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that too, Marty. And how, Peter, we've moved that whole teacher concept to coach, and we've evolved. As you said, the equipment is much better. It hardly fails. And there's solutions, as Bob mentioned, on YouTube, and with some reasonable common sense. There aren't that many problems, and those that come about can be solved.
So we'll take one of these ideas that we've talked about tonight and produce them into future shows. So how do you use Google? How would you use Perplexity? And how would you get set up to do something online for online support? How does that work? I think Chris will be happy to talk about that when he comes back because he put that forth previous show, and I think he put it forth in an email message to me tonight about it. So we'll be tackling some of this. I do like the idea of screenshot kung fu,
Mhm.
as Peter suggested. Bob, I'm going to give you the last word for tonight. Anything else you want to add?
Well, what I want to add is when I first read your suggestion about uh, troubleshooting and fixing your equipment, what I heard in my head was using your Apple tech to fix other things in your life.
Hmm.
And I think that there's a fair amount that can be said there. For example, when I took all these screenshots of the previous satellite TV system to help me set up the incoming satellite TV system. So I think there's other things that we can do to talk about using your tech, not repairing your own tech, but using your tech to repair other stuff.
Yeah,
Mhm.
or just general life hacking. I mean, that's a whole large category of how tech can help you with those kinds of issues. I've got one last story, how I used tech when I was a teenager to solve a problem that I had. Remember the Polaroid cameras?
Yep.
My mother's and father's house was set up in a comfortable way with lots of piles of stuff all over the place. And they went on vacation, and I was a teenager, and they left me home alone. So I used the Polaroid technology to take Polaroid pictures of the stacks of stuff all over the living room, cleaned up the living room so I could throw a party that night, and then use the pictures to return the stacks back to where they belong. So Bob, you're right. It can help us set up and unset up technology in a way that works that way. So thank you. You know, bring a friend if you want to bring a friend to the next show. I enjoy this, and I enjoy this group so much. So let's wrap on it for this episode. We aim to record on Wednesdays nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time, where you can watch this crew on YouTube live at youtube.com/@oldmacgang. And we'll also use the site if there are any changes in times. If we, for some reason, have to shift it or a holiday comes around, we'll have that information posted there. Please share this with your friends and other Mac user groups. We'd like to get more of our peers involved in watching the show. Our music bed is by Philip Gross, Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. More information about this podcast and others can be found at thepodtalk.net. I got ourselves a tab. I have information on it for it. You guys want to send me some pictures? If you're willing to do that, I'll put the pictures in too. Thank you, Gary, Peter, and Bob, and we'll see Chris hopefully next time. Guys, anything you want to say before we say goodbye?
Good
All
night.
right.
Say good night,
Bob?
Gracie.
Okay, good night, Gracie. And thank you for being part of the Old Mac gang. See you next time.